for instance, I see all the time like fitness like influencers or whatever doing a like unilateral bench press variation or like a unilateral kettlebell variation, saying, oh, this is going to get you all of the muscle growth that you could ever want, blah blah blah, yada yada yada, when in reality that's just a suboptimal core exercise and a suboptimal chest exercise. For today's cardio chat session, I want to talk about the idea of majoring in the minors. But what do I mean by that? Well, I essentially mean that people tend to focus too much on the stuff that doesn't actually get them any closer to their goals. For instance, people will, instead of focusing on like getting stronger or something, they'll focus all upon like mobility and warm-up drills in order to just feel really good while they're doing their exercises. But that doesn't actually conclude to any more muscle growth or strength gains. And additionally, people will throw in like a 30-minute stretching routine at the end of all their workouts, thinking that it's going to improve their recoverability for the next session and maybe actually lead into more like muscle growth or something. But I think that those are only like two minor examples, but there's so many more. I mean, the list is nearly infinite, to be honest. But the real kicker here is that people try to focus on like exercises that don't do very much, thinking that they are, because they've been misled online. And that's the real culprit. That's the real bummer when it comes to the end of the day, because that just means that these people are getting taken advantage of. But even worse, they're putting in a ton of work for suboptimal, if any, results. I see all the time like fitness like influencers or whatever doing a like unilateral bench press variation or like a unilateral kettlebell variation, saying, oh, this is going to get you all of the muscle growth that you could ever want, blah blah blah, yada yada yada, when in reality that's just a suboptimal core exercise and a suboptimal chest exercise. It's not really training either attributes effectively. And in fact, you're just like, it's like a jack of all trades is a master of none. That's exactly what the exercise is. Yeah, it's training each like movement a little bit, but you're not actually doing either one very well, at least not well enough to actually see progress from it. And that's where things like age-old principles like progressive overload and whatnot, and like increasing your volume and proper like scientific exercise selection and all these sound principles come into play. Yeah, they're not super glamorous. They're like pretty like overstated and honestly like overutilized. Well, not overutilized. They're if anything underutilized because they actually work. Excuse me. But people just want to find that like cheat code. I was a victim of this when I first started training. I wanted to find this like holy grail of exercise that would just bring me like a cut above everybody else. But the holy grail doesn't exist. The holy grail is what people have already been doing since the start of all this fitness stuff came about in like the 60s or 70s or 80s or whenever it actually appeared onto the scene. So what I'm trying to really get at here is focus like 90%, 80% or 90% of your attention and of your effort onto the things that actually show progress, things that actually are conclusive to your goals. If your goals are mobility, yeah, stretching and doing mobility drills should be your 80 or 90%. And then everything else should be that 10 to 20. But if your goal is strength training, then you should be doing heavy compound lifts in that like 3 to 6 rep range, not increasing volume, keeping it the same, just focusing on adding weight and getting in there and getting out and doing long rest periods. If your goal is hypertrophy, you should be focusing on getting as much tension and progressive overload and volume as you can and angles on the target muscle as you possibly can. And then just focus on eating enough and recovering enough outside of the gym And then you shouldn't be spending like 50%, 60% of your time on warming up and stretching and cold plunges and, sauna and breath work and all this stuff. Yeah, you can throw that in, but don't expect it to actually yield results. Okay. That's all I'm trying to get at is you can major in the minors if you want, but just understand what you're in for. You're not going to be in for like this huge revelation where you just become like the best athlete of all time. No, you still have to follow all of the same scientific principles that the human body obeys by. So just keep that in mind. And people's like other voice on this is, oh, well, look at like people like Ronnie Coleman and blah, blah, blah. They're all like beat up. They're half robotic now. Well, yeah, that's because they went extremely heavy for an extremely long time. I'm not saying to get crazy with the weights. As you get older, yeah, you may want to transition to like for instance, here's an example. We know that you can build muscle off of as little as like 3 to 5 repetitions and as high as like 30 plus repetitions, as long as you're taking it to failure. So as you get older, strategies of using higher repetitions or like blood flow restriction may be a good idea if you're feeling some pain in your joints or in your ligaments or something. But and that can work just as effectively as doing things like lower repetitions. So don't think that you don't have a workaround when you do. So that whole excuse of, oh, I want to major in the minors because look at Ronnie Coleman and these other people who went super hard and lifted a ton of weight for a very long time. And now look at them. They're not doing so hot. Well, if they had the knowledge that we do today, then they had a coach where the coach was like, okay, maybe you should back off doing 800-pound deadlifts. And I'm sure they would be fine. You know what I mean? We have the knowledge today. The problem is that we have so much of it that there's so much misinformation too, that a lot of people, they don't have strong guidance or a good mentor or, whatever else, that they are misled and they actually end up majoring the minors for far too long. And honestly, fucking up their whole routine. And that's a quick way to lead to burnout. If you're not seeing progress for a long time, maybe you'll decide that lifting isn't for you, or whatever you're trying to get after isn't for you. And, there are people like non-responders out there. Don't get me wrong. There's people who they'll weight train for like 16 weeks with a coach, everything else being equal, and they don't gain any muscle and any strength. And yeah, that would really suck if you're a non-responder when this is what you want to do. But, not everybody is the same, I don't have like crazy Jay Cutler, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Usain Bolt, Michael Phelps genetics for any of those different sports. But I'm doing my best and I'm majoring in the majors. And I think that that's all that really matters. So, yeah. Additionally, I just kind of like to highlight what I think you should be doing for each different training variable or different training specialization. I already talked about strength, touched on hypertrophy a little bit, but what about other things like cardio? What if you're like training for a marathon? Well, there's this term that people like to throw around. It's called specificity is king. Specificity is key. What that means is whatever you're trying to get better at, you should be attributing most of your time to. And this kind of goes with majoring in the minors. Major in something that you want to improve upon. So for instance, if you want to get better at like your 100-yard dash or whatever, or your 400, then you should be working specifically on that particular thing most of the time. Of course, you could throw in like that other 10, 20%. You could throw in other types of training methods, like hurdles or, like Norwegian 4x4 or whatever you want to do. And eventually, that could help. But you really want to spend like most of your time training for that specific thing. Like look at powerlifters or strongmen. You think that they spend all their day doing their accessory work? They're spending most of their day doing their bench press, their squat, their deadlift, And then on the side, maybe they're doing like a row and a bicep curl or something, you know? Additionally, with strongmen, they're working with those stones, they're working with those tires, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, that's about it for today. Let me know what you think about this whole idea of majoring in the minors. I'm not saying to like not to do other stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying know which things have real value. Know which activities have real value and real conclusive like data to be putting you in the right direction in accordance to your goals. That's all I'm really trying to say. So have a good one. Later.